Hello, this is Pastor Rick, and I'm going to welcome you to the Sunday Forum, this special winter table talk edition, as we talk about a troubling topic this morning. Israel declares war. Okay, how should we now pray as Christians? Now that the Israelis have declared war, this is a unique situation. As you've been watching in the news, Israel was attacked by the Hamas militants 2 or 3 days ago, as I'm filming, and those militants are still battling Israeli soldiers in Israel, across the border, in a lot of the border towns, 2 days, 3 days after the initial invasion. Hundreds have been killed on both sides, and even 9 Americans have died in the conflict, and it seems like other Americans may have been taken hostage. The reactions have been swift and fierce from all sides, and let me just review some of those reactions for you right now. First of all, the Israeli defense minister has ordered a complete siege of the Gaza Strip. Now, this Gaza Strip has been under siege for 16 years. But this is complete. No water, no electricity, no food, nothing for a landmass that's densely populated, about the size of Luxembourg. Complete. 2, and this is a reaction from a very prominent news writer in Israel, Nahum Barnea. I got it from Thomas Friedman, his quote in the New York Times. He wrote, "This is the worst day that I can remember in military terms in the history of Israel, including the blunder of the Yom Kippur War, which was terrible." This is quite an invasion. This surpasses any expectations that Israeli intelligence had really expected or planned for. And here he's really summarized it. Third, there are demonstrations in solidarity of Hamas and the Palestinians all over the Middle East. They have been registered in Bahrain and Morocco, Turkey, Yemen, Tunisia, Kuwait, Egypt, Lebanon, and even in Saudi Arabia. And Saudi Arabia was working on a peace agreement with Israel. But of course, always the implication was that Israel would take care of the Palestinians at some level. And so here now is Saudi diplomats are going to put that peace treaty on hold, and they're quoted as saying to the Israelis, "We told you so, we told you so." You have to finally solve the problem of the Palestinians. So many different reactions. And in this video, we're not going to review what our government's response should be here in the U.S. There's going to be a lot of reports that we can follow, but rather we're going to take another angle of vision and say, well, now, given all these reactions, how do we Christians pray? How do we approach this conflict, a conflict which has been going on forever, in prayer? How do we lift them up, both Palestinians and Israelis, to the throne of grace? We're going to end the video with some suggestions. But first, just a brief history. And the brief history just outlines that this is a long-running conflict. In other words, you're not just going to solve it like that. 1947 is when the UN divvied up the old British mandate of Palestine and created 2 states, a Jewish state and an Arab state. And war broke out immediately in 1948 and 49. In other words, this conflict started from the very beginning. 1956, there was the Suez Crisis, where Egypt took over all traffic through the Suez Canal and blockaded any Israeli ships from passing. Of course, that was devastating economically, and within a few days, then Israel attacked in various places, took back some of the land around the Suez Canal. They finally had a peace treaty in 1957 as Israel withdrew. But in 1967, we had the 6-Day War. Again, we're here The Golan Heights play a role. Gaza Strip is taken over. Again, the Sinai Peninsula is partly captured by Israeli forces. You can see these places we've heard about, they've been part of wars from, again, the beginning. 1973, the Yom Kippur War, which I've already mentioned, that was the first time that Israeli soldiers took some real devastating losses in this conflict. 1979, Camp David Accords. We remember the courageous leadership that was provided by Jimmy Carter, Anwar Sadat, and Menachem Begin. And Sadat paid for that with his life. Finally, it takes courageous leadership, as we've seen in the past at the Camp David Accords, if peace is going to be achieved. 1982, the Lebanon War, and since 1987, the Intifada, when kids were just picking up stones and attacking Israeli soldiers. Since 1987, the conflict, the small skirmishes, the breakout from Hamas or Hezbollah, it just happens almost on a yearly basis. In fact, it's almost numbing. And that couldn't prevent our prayers, because we hear about the conflict happening over and over again, and the suffering of the Palestinians, the threat to the Israeli state. And we can become cynical and stop praying. There was at one point the two-state solution that came from the Oslo Accords, and that seemed promising, but to be quite honest, almost no one is speaking today of the Oslo Accords or the two-state solution. It seems like everyone has given up on what was at that time the most promising solution out there. And so, what should be our response? Well, first of all, it is prayer. Prayer is significant. And here we want to turn to Psalm 122, verse 6. And I think this psalm can guide us. We pray for the peace of Jerusalem. It says, may they prosper who love you. So we pray for Jerusalem and for the peace in that area of the world. But now when we say pray for Jerusalem, that doesn't mean we pray just for the Israeli government. We're praying for Jerusalem. And in Jerusalem today, you have Palestinians and you have Israelis, both trying to figure out how to live together under horrible conditions because, well, the conflict's like a bad marriage. And you've talked to friends who've had bad marriages. You talk to one side and you go, oh, how could you have lived with such brutal treatment? And then you hear the other side and you go, oh, wow, that's not nice either. And it's as if they've been in the mud. And the difficulties for so long, it's hard to figure out who's on the right side and who's on the wrong side. And that's what we discover in this history. There is no righteous side. Both sides have claims, appropriate claims, but both sides have been brutal to one another. So when we say pray for the peace of Jerusalem, it's for all in Jerusalem, Palestinians and Israelis. But secondly, I think we have to pray for new leadership. Leadership which has a different commitment to peace, a new vision for peace, and who has the courage, as those leaders had in 1979 in the Camp David Accords. God, may you raise up new leaders in this area of the world who can lead and follow all righteousness. Because again, this is part of the biblical tradition. God is on the side of righteousness, not just on the side of the Israeli government or the Palestinians. Remember when Joshua crossed the Jordan, he ran into that angel and said, oh, you're on our side, right? And the angel said, no, I'm on God's side. And so here, peace is what it means, and justice, what it means to be on God's side. Finally, as Lutherans, we're very involved in this area of the world. We have major ministries in Jerusalem to the Palestinians as well as in Bethlehem. And so we know it's been hard for Palestinian Christians to stay in Jerusalem and Bethlehem because of all the pressure they're under. So in particular, we want to lift up those Palestinian Christians, our brothers and sisters, many who are Lutheran, that God would continue to give them the courage, and maybe leadership for peace will arise from this amazing group of Christians in this area of the world. And so we'd like to close this video by calling you to prayer, that you would indeed now, on your prayer list, the list of people and events that you pray for every day, include Jerusalem. Pray for the peace of Jerusalem. We want to leave you with this prayer, and as you listen to the music at the end of the video, say that prayer not just silently but out loud, and continue to pray for Jerusalem. Thanks for joining us on this special edition of Table Talks. Bye-bye now.